What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another highly combustible reaction. We're going to be jumping into part 2 of our Rembrandt van Rijn journey, the real Rembrandt. This will finish off the second part of the documentary, coming at us via donation from Halloween. Much love from the bottom of my heart. I do appreciate it. Let's make sure we got some full sound, and let's jump right in.
At the original. If we take a closer look at the copy, we see how carelessly, even angrily, shadows have been painted under the nose, between the lips, and under the chin. Once again, the X-ray shows that the background does not carry on under the outline of the neck, but that the tapering paint strokes stop exactly there. That's how an example is copied. The question remains, who would make such a copy?
As some people were saying in the comments that I didn't even think about, is they were saying, like, with all great masters out there, you're going to have students that you teach your things to. So some of those copies could have been done by students. Some of those copies could. That's very interesting. I would have never, ever thought about that. Honestly, straight away, my head goes to painting forger, criminals, that kind of people. I would have never, ever thought. I saw the comments yesterday that, hey, you ever think that maybe he taught someone how to paint just like him? And that they tried to recreate his works to see if they could do it. Smart. What's happening?
Rembrandt spent 27 years of his life in this part of Amsterdam, the neighborhood around the Zuiderkerk. Here, he worked in 4 studios and had numerous pupils. The master first came to this teeming economic and artistic center in 1626 as a pupil of Peter Lastman, who lived near the church. He returned in 1632 and worked with the art dealer Eilenberg, who lived on the corner of the Breestraat. Govert Flink also worked there. In 1635...
I love how even the little like map depictions of the town. Look how quaint it looks. In real life, we know it's just as quaint. It's just those little Dutch houses.
A year after he married Saskia van Eilenberg, he moved to the Doelenstraat, where Ferdinand Bol became his pupil. And 2 years later, he moved to the Suikerbakker Alley, where he taught Van Eekhout. In 1639, he bought a house next door to Eilenberg in the Breestraat. This house, now the Rembrandt house, which he bought on credit, would later bring about his financial downfall.
He bought on credit?
It was here, under a shelter in the garden, that he painted the Night Watch. Pupils in this house included Karel Fabritius and Samuel van Hoogstraten. Following his bankruptcy, Rembrandt moved to the Rozengracht, on the western side of the ring of canals, which had become the new commercial center of Amsterdam, overlooked by the Westerkerk, where he was later buried. All the time, especially during his early years as an artist, he had pupils, journeymen, and associates, amateurs and professionals. At least 54 in total.
Wow, 54. That's
and
a whole
amateurs and professionals.
Following.
At least 54 in total. Their presence is documented by the many models which have been immortalized both by Rembrandt and by his pupils. Rembrandt's pupils came to the famous master to learn a craft or his style. He took them on because it enhanced his status as a master, but also because they were productive. After all, there was a market for paintings in 17th century.
It's mind-blowing right there. It's literally a painting of a painting. Like, that's very cool. Even the picture in the window, there's just so much detail. And then somebody else was pointing out that when you look at it, the detail's there. You could see everything, but when you focus on the detail is just blobs. It makes no sense that you could make it to where somebody's mind believes that it's that thing.
Holland. Canvases were on sale.
Is that a clown in the middle of the window? I don't like the clown.
Everywhere. And judging by the illustrations of bourgeois interiors in Holland's golden age, people were keen to hang something on the wall.
I could see that. Nobody wants to have a blank wall.
There were also noticeable market trends. A popular subject was Flora, the Roman goddess of fertility, who had been painted by Titian. So Rembrandt, a man of finance, painted Floras too, choosing his loved ones as the protagonists. Saskia in 1634, the year he married, and in 1635, and Hendrikia Stoffels some 12 years later. But Rembrandt also led his pupils down the commercial path. A Jour de Ville painted in the 1630s. It is a Flora, but we can see clearly that it's not a Rembrandt, who nonetheless was not averse to keeping the proceeds from his pupils' works. A document is kept in Berlin.
They just said he was not adverse to keeping the money from his pupils' works. I don't blame him. If I'm teaching you how to be as good as me, I'm gonna get some money out of it. I'm getting a percentage. I'm getting a cut.
A document is kept in Berlin, handwritten by Rembrandt. He recorded a transaction on the reverse of a drawing. It says, Leenderts. This is Leendert van Beren. Leenderts Flore, sold for 5 guilders. Unique proof that Rembrandt dealt in the works of his pupils. Trade, commerce. Is it surprising that Rembrandt cashed in on his success in the booming economy of the Dutch Republic?
Not at all.
We know of 110 portraits made by the master, all of which fetched respectable sums of money. They were commissioned by wealthy Dutch citizens and have since travelled to various parts of the world. The wife of a Rotterdam merchant, Hasje van Kleeberg, now in Amsterdam. A councillor of the Dutch East India Company, Philip Lucas, now in London. Maria Tripp, daughter of a wealthy merchant, in Amsterdam. The Catholic poet Jan Hermans Krul, in Kassel. And numerous unidentified portraits in Cincinnati, in New York. You'll find them in museums the world over. Apart from those people who were painted by Rembrandt himself, such as Nicholas van Baambeek, and whose portraits were signed by the master, some people had their portrait painted by one of Rembrandt's associates. Apparently this man, the diplomat Koppel, didn't object. After all, he was on the spot when it happened. Strangely enough, the portrait was signed by Rembrandt. It's a fine portrait and it came from his studio, so we may assume that the signature was a stamp of approval, the studio's hallmark. Not only was this work created in Rembrandt's studio, so was this one.
That would make it a little confusing to see his signature on a painting and then have it just be his seal of approval on someone else's work, and the whole time you thought it was a Rembrandt? That would be devastating.
Not only was this work created in Rembrandt's studio, so was this one. Not by Rembrandt, but signed by him. Not only did this leave his studio, so did this. Not by Rembrandt, but signed by him. Not only this work, but this one too, both signed by the master. So Rembrandt must have been a good teacher, or rather a good manager as regards quality control. Apprentices had to learn how to begin a drawing, how to mix paints, how to put together a palette. But most of Rembrandt's pupils knew that before they came to his studio. What they wanted was to master the repertoire of a craftsman, the tricks of the trade, like painting a portrait. They had to learn that the shadow under a nose begins sharply and ends blurred, that a dab of red has to be applied to the light side of the nostril to suggest the transparency of the skin, that the lighter paint in a light zone has to be drawn towards the light. that the shadow of a nose begins...
Detail. Even right here, it doesn't feel like you're looking at a painting. It feels like you're looking at a damn person. Even the water in the eyes, the glaze on the eyes, everything was just done so magnificently. It's ridiculously beautiful when you look at it. I'm glad that some of these are still around for us to be able to see. Like this is, you got to think this way before any kind of technology that would help you do anything of the sort. Like, especially, and you know, people were coming from far and wide once they saw his paintings to be like, yo, how are you doing this? Like, this is ridiculous. Compared to some of the other ones, you could definitely tell. You could look at one and be like, no, that's flat. And look at the other one and be like, yeah, that's him.
As a dark tone and becomes lighter. That the highlight on an eyelid is reflected in the dark socket. That the ball of the eye needs a sparkle, and that tears on the lower eyelid are indicated by a white line. That the eyeball casts a shadow on the skin next to it, and that a touch of light should be dabbed in at the back of the dark part of the cheek, reflection of an invisible source of light, creating perceptual space. That is what Rembrandt taught his pupils. It's quite clear that they tried their best to equal their master in everything they did. Rembrandt on the right, a pupil on the left. Still, on close scrutiny, we can recognize the hand of the pupil. A portrait of a woman by Isaac Jourdeville. Quite good at first sight, although a connoisseur may take offense at the fact that she's not wearing a headdress. But now we take a look at another Jourdeville, a portrait of a man. A similarity with the first portrait may already create a degree of irritation. And a third. On all of them, we see the sharp shadow of the nose, the thick lower lip, the stereotype lighting, and especially that blank gaze, as if they were portraits of dolls. The apprentice tends to repeat certain characteristics by which we can recognize him as being different from Rembrandt, and, unfortunately for him, as being inferior to Rembrandt. And has this painter ever wondered what kind of a forehead would produce such a shadow? Now we can put it to the test. Here we see how it should have been done. A study of the same woman by Rembrandt, who must have been sitting next to his pupil. By the way, a painting in profile of the same woman shows that she was perfectly well proportioned. Apprentices betray themselves in unexpected ways. This drawing by Rembrandt, Daniel's Vision, has been copied by a pupil. It is a fine work of art and a good imitation of the example. But in the Bible,
the X-ray scans are something ridiculous. I could watch that all day long. Like, legitimately, just show me an X-ray scan of a painting and then show me what it really looks like. Give me the reveal. I'm down all day.
Daniel says, "In front of me stood a person who looked like a man." Rembrandt, well versed in the Bible, would certainly have painted a man, not the angelic little boy we see here. The work referred to before, Abraham's Sacrifice, was later corrected by Rembrandt on a drawing. Instead of appearing from the side, the angel appears from behind, which is even more of a surprise. Later, an oil painting was made of the drawing, and a good one at that. Inscribed on it was, "Rembrandt, changed and repainted." It is not quite clear whether it was painted by Rembrandt himself or by his pupil Ferdinand Bol. Of Rembrandt's pupils, one has a very distinctive style, his first, Gerard Dow. The artist taught his apprentice how to master fine painting. Dow perfected this style during his lifetime, as we can see from various portraits he made of Rembrandt's mother. It was his specialization, his only one. And he remained true to it well after his teacher and colleague Rembrandt had moved on to a totally different style. Rembrandt had experimented with various surfaces from a very early age. For a while, he painted on smooth, even surfaces, but he also tried rougher varieties. He strived for maximum expression in his paint. Even when the market demanded beautiful, smooth paintings, Rembrandt kept his unique, almost sculptured style. His last big commission, De Staalmeesters, was also painted in that style. He had found the form by which he would be remembered.
You can almost feel the texture of everything, like the tablecloth, the paper.
Rembrandt's strong influence made it difficult for painters like Govert Flinck and Ferdinand Bol to go it alone, even though they were successful artists, and despite the fact that Bol was able to rest on his laurels at an early age. Rembrandt was ever present in their work. Rembrandt always managed to amaze his colleagues, even in genres in which he didn't specialize, such as landscapes. And just as Govert Flinck immediately imitated the sun-drenched treetops painted by his master, many an artist, both within Rembrandt's studio and far beyond, painted in a Rembrandtesque fashion for a time. And that is how they saw the light of day. The typically Rembrandtesque faces and portraits. This one is by Govert Flinck. The old men involved in gold. This one is by Philips Koning.
You can tell that they all were most certainly paying attention, though. They're all most certainly looking at the way that he does the lighting, and the way that he does the shading. Because some of them before were real flat. Some of those other ones that we see are very, very flat, or very overly darkened, or underly lightened. Like, the whole thing is very, very... It's very cool to look at a Rembrandt when they compare it to another one, because you could really see the difference in just quality. Like, overall quality, texture, shading, everything is there. It looks like a real damn person. It looks like a photograph. But you can tell that these ones, as they went on, they're starting to pay attention. They're starting to learn.
And portraits. This one is by Govert Flinck. The old men involved in gold. This one is by Philips Koning. The attempts to conjure up the essence of textures in an almost maniacal manner. Combinations of soft human skin and metals such as bronze, copper and iron. This one is by Willem Drost. The strikingly lifelike portraits. This work was painted by one of his best students, the man who could possibly have outshone Rembrandt, but who sadly died in an explosion in Delft, Karel Fabritius.
It's amazing how much detail.
And the historical scenes, painted in Rembrandt's later rough style, copied by no one except the loyal Art de Gelder, who made more than 100 works in this style after Rembrandt's death. This entire massive corpus came to hang in the chic world of art lovers, art dealers, and art critics. And works by Rembrandt were sharply
See, more
criticized.
paintings of paintings.
But things changed in the 19th century.
Even the
citizens
paintings
of
in the
Europe
painting have
speak out
detail.
and rediscover Rembrandt, a stubborn genius who couldn't care less about standing or class, the romantic ideal. Holland becomes a kingdom, and nationalism flourishes. Orange and fatherland are the in words, and Holland is in search of national heroes. Suddenly, people remember Rembrandt, proud, very Dutch, very Christian, and reviled. So things have to be put right. Of course, a statue has to be made, like the Belgians did for their master, Rubens. The statue was erected in Amsterdam, in cast iron because bronze was too expensive.
This legitimately is one of the most, I guess, like captivating documentaries that I've ever seen. I've never in my life sat down and watched anything so in detail about paintings. Ever. Like, this is the deepest I've ever gone on painting. And what a person to go deeper with than Rembrandt. I definitely knew the name before, but now, my God, I've got a whole new respect for the man. Ridiculous.
But the veneration didn't stop at that. Rembrandt was almost declared a saint. He became a kind of Christ. His major works were no longer...
He was in the church stained glass?
Almost declared a saint. He became a kind of Christ. His major works were no longer simply exhibited in the Maurits House in The Hague and the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. They lay in state. Admiration had turned into infatuation. In the Netherlands, and even more so abroad, there was no end to the appearance of new books and reports. Little wonder that the demand for works by Rembrandt rocketed, as did the supply.
Lot 67, £50,000 offered for it.
They appeared out of the blue, the real ones and the fakes. The price was irrelevant, as long as it was human and signed, and preferably in dark brown.
60,000, 65,000, 70,000, 75,000, 80,000, 85,000.
Following the centennial celebration in 1906, one catalogue put the number of Rembrandt works at 988.
Whoa.
Now things had gone too far.
Everybody was coming out wanting to be Rembrandt.
People started to call for a definitive cleanup. But it was only in 1968 that the Rembrandt Research Project was launched in Holland. Now, more than 20 years later, 5 of the original group of experts are still involved in the project. Haak, van der Wetering, Levy, Bruin, and Van Thiel. They have seen and analysed hundreds of Rembrandt works the world over. Their approach as a group has surprised the art world, but they now command deep respect, despite the inevitable criticism which their work has aroused. The group's task entailed much more than just meetings. Most of the information used in this program was supplied by the Rembrandt Research Project, which now includes scholars from all over the world. They emphasize that the results of their efforts should not be regarded as a Bible, despite the fact that the publication looks very much like it.
Yeah, it does.
Their style of writing off paintings has gained worldwide fame. The lighting on the canvas, the Noble Slav, now in the Rijksmuseum, is typical of Rembrandt, more so on the turban than on his face. The way in which the clothing, ornaments and background have been portrayed also strongly reminded us of Rembrandt. However, the creation of perceptual space has shortcomings. There are only 2 shades of brown in the eye socket. Rembrandt used several hues to suggest the curvature of the eyelid. The crescent-shaped light in the left eye is not convincing.
They could tell that it's not one of his just by something so simple, whereas the rest of us would have just passed it by. Like,
the fabric of
genuine.
the coat can't be distinguished. The clothes have not been draped on the body, but have been painted around the body. The colours are somewhat murky, and the combinations used are not characteristic of Rembrandt. The signature is overly elegant and not convincing. The Rembrandt Research Project is broadening its scope. Graphologists of the forensic laboratory in Rijswijk, who are generally involved with blackmailers and check counterfeiters, know that the handwriting of each individual has certain characteristics which will inevitably betray him.
Like a fingerprint.
On that principle, Rembrandt's authentic signature has been distilled from photographs of a large number of Rembrandt signatures. The R begins with a curved
What is this
downstroke,
sound?
which then makes a sharp bend to the top of the letter. The E has a small loop at the top and is stuck to the R at the bottom. The downstrokes of the M slant slightly to the left. The same applies to the R and both downstrokes of the N. The B has a small loop at the top and also has a slightly slanted downstroke. However, the D and the T are quite straight. And that is how the graphologists started to make comparisons. The most striking discovery was that an imitation signature was found on 60% of the real Rembrandt paintings.
Whoa, 60%?
This means that a signature doesn't say very much about the authenticity of a painting. It emphasizes once again that the eye is the most important instrument for recognizing the genius of Rembrandt. So, if we cast our eye on Rembrandt, we discover more and more enigmas. In some paintings, it is inexplicable how the paint was applied to the canvas and how it stayed on without dripping. And once again we ask whether perhaps Rembrandt added a secret substance to his paint or binding agent.
He could have.
Snow, sawdust, urine, breadcrumbs, sand, all sorts of things were used to cleanse oil or to dry or thicken the paint. The Dutch chemical company, DSM, in Geleen, is dissolving bits of Rembrandt's paint to trace the origin of his white lead. They are studying the drying mechanism by analyzing a surface layer which is no bigger than 1/1,000,000th of a pinhead. They are examining cross-sections of bits of paint in an electron microscope, which can visually identify elements such as cobalt or silicon.
Holy crap. This is not art. We have crossed the bounds of art into science. I didn't know that science and art ever like collided like this. This is very cool.
Elements such as cobalt or silicon. But all we can see at the moment is the mystery of Rembrandt's paint surface.
That's so crazy. The ridiculous textures. Everything looks so perfect.
Plus a string of other mysteries, because that is indeed what they are. How Rembrandt managed to create the impression that his models, while sitting for him, had forgotten that they were sitting for him. There they stand, often hesitant, timeless.
Frozen with that
the frame
emotion.
around the painting no longer seems to exist. We see people, the people you meet everywhere, wherever you go.
Yes. I don't see a painting, I see people. It's crazy.
The expressions of people who are unexpectedly filmed reveal their most personal sensitivity, their vulnerability. "300 years ago, such expressions were immortalized in paint by a somewhat moody man who said, 'A painting is finished when the artist says it is finished.'"
Very true. Even the reflection on the water and the anatomy, the different muscle and bone structures, everything is on point. In order to do something like this, same thing like sculpting. You have to know a little bit about anatomy before you can ever do this. Because if you start painting the wrong muscles, the wrong bones, the wrong bumps and things in the wrong places, people will notice. People that know the human body are going to notice that it doesn't look like a human body. Whole new respect. A whole new respect. Ridiculous.
U bent op mevrouw Lips? Ja. Is dit bekend bij de intendant? Ja.
We're just letting these credits roll out. We should be finishing off in a second. I got caught up in the music. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Rembrandt van Rijn, the real Rembrandt. Seriously, a very, very interesting, intriguing documentary. A look into art like I've never looked at art before. Definitely interested in looking at some more. If you guys enjoyed it, make sure you hit the like button. If you disliked it, hit the dislike button. Go show the original poster some love on their channel. It'll be down inside of the description. If you're seeing this video, obviously we're dropping it on a new channel. That's because we got some copyright issues to deal with on the other channel before we're allowed to drop. Hopefully they'll get cleared up. If not, this is where the videos will be dropped. I'm glad you're here. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Till the next one, I'm highly combustible. You guys be happy, healthy, safe. I love you to the moon and back. Peace.